What up, everybody? This is yours truly, Rama Screen, and it's another collabo, another celebration. This time we're gonna discuss Tim Burton's Batman 30th anniversary, and I'm here joined again by my fellow YouTuber, Anthony. What's up, Anthony?
What's going on? Thanks for having me back on. It's starting to be a repeat process. I'm having fun. And this is a great movie to talk about. I'm excited.
That's right. Indeed it is. So, we'll get right to it. First of all, it's already trending on Twitter. It's hashtag Batman89. I'm sure those of you, our viewers, your viewers, and my viewers have been seeing that all morning. Just a bit of information before we get right to our discussion here. Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, first hit theaters nationwide June 23rd, 1989. So today, June 23rd, 30 years ago. The premiere was June 19th, the red carpet. So, and the movie ended up winning one Oscar for Best Production Design, aka Art Direction. The movie also went on to taking in more than $411 million at the box office worldwide, and that was a big deal at the time. Now it's like, freaking like, oh, you got to play $1 billion.
Yeah.
So
That's a loss for a film nowadays.
exactly, especially at that scale, the big budget. So I want to share with you, Anthony, and then you can share yours as well. I first watched this movie, not in the theaters, obviously. I was 6 years old at the time, 1989. I watched it first, I think, in 1996, and it was on TV. I was in my grandma's house. My family's home was being renovated at the time. So I saw it on TV, and at the time, I was a kid. So when you were kids, man, when you were a kid, everything looks so awesome. You don't really have analytical opinion about it. Like, oh my God, it's Batman, and you just jump into it. Years later, I saw it on a DVD, and of course, by that time, I grew up and became more critical about some things. And because I grew older, I appreciated more than when I was a kid. When everything just looks like sunshine and rainbow when I was a kid. So let me hear your story. When did you first watch Batman?
I'm a little bit older, so I do remember going to watch this movie in the theaters. I think I was 11 when this movie came out. And I vaguely remember that. I could remember getting with my friends and going to watch this movie in the theater. But the nostalgic memory is like, this is the first movie I ever owned. It's like that following year you had to wait. Once the movie wasn't in the theaters, you had to wait a whole year by the time it came out on VHS. My birthday was the following year. I got this movie on VHS. It was the first actual like hard copy movie I had, and I just wore it out. I mean, I got pulled into the world. I loved Michael Keaton as the character. Jack Nicholson was fantastic. And that's where I built up my love of just repeatedly watching that VHS until the tape wore thin.
That's right. You are Gen Y, correct?
Yeah.
I'm a millennial. So you were old enough to remember how it was when the the days prior to the movie coming out. Because I read somewhere that I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you remember. In 2008, leading up to the Dark Knight's release, there were all these kinds of viral marketing, online. It's like, oh, go to this website or that website, and then at one point, everybody was led to this Batman insignia that was projected like a light onto a building. So there's a lot of viral marketing, and everybody was like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming for the Dark Knight. But I remember Kevin Smith, I think it was in one of the interviews, he said, this is nothing. Back in 1989, you look left and right, everything was just Batman stickers everywhere, Batman, the bus signs. How crazy was the Batmania at the time?
Yeah, well, this is like the first blockbuster movie I've ever grew up with.
Yeah.
This was the first like event film. I mean, Superman, the movie had already came out.
Yes.
Star Wars had already came out. I was like, 11 years old. I was really getting into movies, and yeah, was not wrong. I mean, you would go to the stores and you would see him on the chip. It was the first like time where you just see the product placement. I mean, you go to Taco Bell and there was like collect the cups, and you go to
Wow.
McDonald's and collect the toys, and trading cards for Batman. The books, they had the paperback books of just like the book book version of the movie were coming out right after it was over. But yeah, leading up to it, it was the first time I remember just this movie is everywhere. And I mean, eventually I would go on to see that again with like, Jurassic Park and movies like that. But this was the first one that I think I went to Disneyland around that year, and there was a heavy presence of like that and Dick Tracy at the time. It was like either Dick Tracy's hat, you get that fedora and merchandise for that, or it was Batman. And yeah, it was everywhere.
Yeah, my friend who is also a bit older, maybe same Gen Y like you, and she told me that she waited hours in line for her Batman showtime. I remember in the 2008, The Dark Knight, there were like multiple showtimes in the evening. I remember there's like long lines coming out of every screening room inside Regal Cinema, local theater here. Is it as crazy as that? How long did you wait?
I don't really remember that. I mean, at the time, I just remember us going to we went to like the fast food place. We got some food with, Batman all over it. And then we went to the movie. I guess, my buddy's dad worried about the lines and stuff like that. I was too young. I was just excited to go. I'm sure we probably waited at least like a month after it came out. I mean, we weren't really I was never one of the guys that was able to like get to the theater as a kid and catch a movie its opening weekend or something. I would usually catch stuff a little bit late. But yeah, I mean, and then it was funny because you talk about just all that stir around the movie hitting the theaters, and then the same thing started up all over again once it hit VHS. It was like the biggest VHS to have, and that's why it's like I took that thing to elementary school and I would just sit it on the corner of my desk while I'm doing my work. I'd take it home with me. I brought it around like it was my basketball, So
it's funny.
It was just something to have. You had to have that Batman VHS tape.
It's funny how, because I grew up also with VHS. It's funny how you and I talked about how awesome VHS was at the time. It was like the Blu-ray of the 90s.
Now $65 for a VHS tape. Not bad.
Not bad.
You had to wait only had to wait maybe 12 to 14 months after the movie hit theaters.
Now, what was your reaction the first time you watched this Batman movie back then?
I thought it was larger than life. I mean, I think the way Tim Burton created this, it's like almost like a disambiguous timeline because it's set in the past. It sometimes looks like it's the 60s. Then you notice some of the cars, it's like the 70s. And that's all stuff that I notice now. But at the time, I didn't place that together. But it really just created this kind of alternate hyper reality. It was almost dystopian at times, but it was very menacing. And it was the perfect like cityscape for Batman to come in and do his stuff. And I thought Michael Keaton was just... I mean, he delivers his lines fantastic. He's like a larger than life Bruce Wayne, but he's also very humanized in the film. So he's really able to connect with. And it was just great to see the eccentric Jack Nicholson as Joker. It was just, at the time, the special effects were fantastic for us. And it's like there was a lot of practical effects in there. That's why I think the movie still really holds up, is just because of the practical sets and the smoke and the steam and the shadows. Everything just holds up over the years. But it was a movie that I could watch and just get swept up into over and over and over again. It was like my first big comic book movie where it's like that was probably my favorite movie for 10 years.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. As I said earlier, I watched it in the mid-90s. And by then, Batman Forever already came out, and that was like a year before Batman and Robin. And of course, as I said earlier, also that as a kid, everything looks awesome to me. But thinking back at that, I was like, wow, it's a different Batman movie compared to the Schumacher ones. It's just like much darker, and we'll get to that, of course. But let me also pick your brain about this, because I rewatched it last night in preparation for our conversation, and because the movie is shot at Pinewood Studios, the famous Pinewood Studios in England, and you said that it uses a lot of practical effects, obviously, all the props. And if you notice, I don't know if you agree with me, that compared to the other Batman movies, especially the Christopher Nolan's ones, where Christopher Nolan Batman movies would utilize actual cities like Chicago to double as Gotham. But if you watch this Tim Burton's Batman and also Batman Returns, you can totally tell it's like at a back lot. Like one of those, the fake buildings, the fake streets,
Yeah, it's almost like it's that. It's the same thing that happened with Dick Tracy, where it's almost like a story. It's almost like a blend of like practical acting with storyboarding. And it's just
Yes.
you got the motion storyboards. I mean, first the film starts off, you get that great Danny Elfman score as you get that tracking shot through the 3D logo, and then it comes out, it opens up on that. It's almost like a motion storyboard where it's like the traffic is moving, but everything else is just completely still shot. And I think that's where it's great. I mean, with Christopher Nolan's Batmans, I mean, he brought those into a reality, like
Yeah.
a current day modern world. These ones are a little bit of that modern world, but definitely set in a comic book world. I mean, the
Yes.
plot of this movie is great for this film, but nowadays it wouldn't work. I mean, people would want to know, how is he making the people smile with the cosmetics and stuff like that? It's like people want to know too much about things, and this one worked. It felt like really like a version of something that you would read, like a storyline that you would read in a comic book with the things that people would say in a comic book, or like a even like the animated series. And that's where I think it holds up. That's why it's like it from a technical aspect, I don't think it was able to accomplish what Nolan's films did, but I think those two movies definitely had two different intentions, and I think they're both great for their own. I mean, the nostalgia and the camp of Tim Burton's Batman, and a little bit in part two, compared to like even the Schumacher ones, is a definition between good camp and bad camp.
Yes.
And where it's into cheesiness and it's like a shtick and it just doesn't work. But this one was like all the pieces just worked. It just creates its own world, its own atmosphere, and it's a little bit of real world, but it's also very much comic book inspired, and that's where I think it still holds up, despite some of the, Jack Nicholson's performance as Joker, maybe in today's standards, not being so good. But at the time, he's in his golden years now, but at the time he was an A-list actor, and to see him going full 100% into this role the way he did was great, and I think that's why it still holds up.
Yeah, I think that is the difference. Like moving forward from Christopher Nolan's Batman's and all the other superhero movies after that, Logan or whatnot, Man of Steel, they're all moving to more and more towards, okay, let's put these superheroes in our world. What if whether they're Gotham, or what if they're Metropolis is next to L.A. or is next to New York, kind of like that. Whereas in Tim Burton's Batman, they say it's dark, but it still has that fantastical, as you said, the comic book series.
Takes the viewer into their world.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the one way to put it. Now, we're gonna delve more on the backstory of how this project got developed. There's so many. As I did my research, I was like, oh my god, there's so many like behind the scenes dramas that go with it. But let's talk a bit about the tone. We said dark. I know that I remember watching an interview with Tim Burton like years later, and how after Christopher Nolan, every other movie wanted to be as dark as Christopher Nolan's Batman's movies. Everybody wanted to copy the darkness of it. And then Tim Burton says, like, now everybody wants to be dark. Dude, I made a dark Batman movie back then. And some of you guys complained. That's basically what he said. But rewatching it again last night, it's not dark per se. It's more like dark comedy. Do you agree with that?
It's dark comic action, like a classic scene to describe this movie as being dark but not dark is like it's the subtleties of it, like when Jack Napier gets dipped into the acid or into the chemicals and he turns into the Joker. He goes to that little black market surgeon down there, and then like he pans over to the tools, and they're like horrific tools to imagine having surgery taken onto you, but like the blood just was a slight off color. It was a little dry. Nowadays it would be just like color covered in blood, and it would instantly make it much more darker than it really was. So it was able to be dark at the same time, but it really knew when to hit the brakes a little bit.
Yep.
To appeal to mainstream, because I mean, as a kid, that was a creepy scene. It's going down there and he hits that light with his fist and breaks it. The doctor turns over and there's this table of medical tools. There's like all these just like barbaric tools. They're covered in kind of like a non-real looking blood, but it's supposed to represent blood. So it was able to kind of do both. It's dark, but not even gory or even dark as far as like
it's not heavy. It's not heavy.
Yeah, it doesn't really dive into dark personality themes and tropes like it did with Heath Ledger's Joker. Even
you're right. It's not so much psychological.
It was eccentric.
Yeah,
eccentric.
Eccentric. That's right. I think some examples that I brought up here on my notes here. For example, when I was watching last night, there was a lot of, I don't know if intentional or unintentional comedic elements. Like I find some of them to be funny, like when Batman a couple of times gets shot. He gets shot and he gets like propelled back and he falls down.
Mhm.
I find that a bit hilarious. And then when he asks Vicky Vale her weight or how much she weighs, I was like, okay, that's like a jab at like don't ask women their weight. And then of course the Joker with his gun that's as long as his leg. So there's like
Yeah.
there's elements like
Yeah.
that where like okay, I know Tim Burton wants to be like doesn't want it to be like heavy kind of dark or depressing
Yeah.
kind of dark.
That's
Right?
when it turns it back into it keeps it cartoonish at the
Yes.
same time. Very
Yes.
much. I mean, even with the sound effects, like all the gunshots are the exact same stock comic book shot, like one shot, and every single gunshot sounds the same. The cops are, everything's very intentional to where like some things are very cartoonish, but it doesn't really, without too many layers being cartoonish, it all kind of blends in together.
That's right. Now, I want to pick a bone with this film, though, and this is one of those things, just like the YouTube channel, I think, Movie Sins, just nitpicking the little details. What is up with that last scene where Batman literally walks up the stairs when he could just like use his bat line or bat rope? I don't get that. Are you as frustrated as that watching that? I was like, really?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah,
gotta.
that's for the sake of Joker's got some dialogue to deliver and he's got a dance to do up there with Vicky Vale. So we're gonna need you to take the stairs just this once because Jack Nicholson's contract has a certain amount of line requirements that have to be put in there, and we haven't hit it yet. So we need at least 2.5 to 3 minutes with Vicky and the Joker up alone. So take the stairs,
Take
buddy.
the stairs, yeah, walk up. Like, oh my god, I know. And I was thinking,
We'll throw a couple bad guys in there, so you got to fight them on the way. It's almost like a little mini version of like a Bruce Lee movie, as he has to
yes.
bounce through a couple guys as he's going up.
And at the end of it, we see him using the bat line again, before the gargoyle scene, and I'm like, where was that all that time? I was like, you could have used
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Hollywood conveniences for the sake of storytelling.
And when I was watching, I was like, oh, maybe he only had like a certain amount of bat line. Maybe he
Yeah.
was running out. I was like, oh, I can't use it.
He's down to his last spool of twine. He couldn't use it.
so,
Didn't want to go up there with no twine in his hand. You don't want to go up with an empty grappling gun.
so those instances that make this movie like light kind of instead of heavy psychological dark,
Yeah.
it's still fun. Those
Yeah.
are the instances.
Those are things like that. If you saw them in like a Nolan film or something like that, then it's like, okay, you're in the real world. I need a little bit more, less suspension of disbelief. I think with this one, the way it was able to just be very eccentric and very just oddball at times, it's just kind of over the top. It's very evented and like cinematic at times, and that's one of those instances where it's like we can get some really cool shots of Batman working his way up this clock tower, taking out a couple of guys, get some good shadowy shots, and it all works out.
Now, on that note, and I'm sure you know this, Michael Huslan, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. He bought the character right to Batman, and he pitched it around town, to studios to make this dark, serious Batman movie. But the studios did not want it because at the time they were like, no, Batman has to be campy, like the Adam West Batman. That's what they wanted. Of course, eventually WB was the only one that said yes, we'll do your Batman, and also when Tim Burton and Michael Keaton were hired, fans were outraged because by then Tim Burton had made Pee-wee's Adventure and Beetlejuice, and of course Michael Keaton is like known for his comedy movies like Mr. Mom and Gung Ho and Night Shift, and my point is that we can't really tell these things. We can't really predict these things. As when it comes to fans' outrage about certain filmmaker or certain actor attached to a movie, because I remember when Heath Ledger got attached to the Joker, people were like, no, not the Brokeback Mountain guy. What are you doing? But then, he turned out to be awesome. And then, but then again, there are some instances when the fans are right. Like, oh, Ben Affleck was a terrible Daredevil. He really was. Mm-hmm. But then some fans will be like, okay, Brandon Routh was a good Superman. The problem was just the script for the Superman Returns. So you just can't tell these things sometimes, but these are the things that happen prior to the production of the film.
Yeah, that's the thing. Until it's like if you're it's a good actor's job is to take on roles and to portray that role to the best of their ability. That's what they get paid to do. It's their profession. They're supposed to be as good at doing that as we are at doing our jobs. So if Tim Burton, who had obviously worked with Michael Keaton already on Beetlejuice a couple of years earlier, or was that just before this one
Yeah,
was Beetlejuice, right?
Beetlejuice. That's right.
He already had obviously done some screen testing. So if the people that are doing the screen testing get the feeling that this guy is going to be good, then everybody else, you're just taking that persona off of another role that you saw or some preconceived notion for like being typecasted. I mean, the same thing happened with Ben Affleck. Everybody loved Ben Affleck as Batman because obviously they had seen him in the screen test. They saw that he could do something that they were willing to pay millions of dollars for. So it's a little bit more than just opinion. I mean, I'm always in the mindset of I'll wait till I see it on screen before I even gauge an opinion, you know?
Yeah. But it's also interesting to note that the studios, except with the exception of WB, because they he shopped it around, that they wanted the campy Adam West Batman, whereas the fans wanted the dark one, the Frank Miller kind of Batman, which is what Michael Uslan was kind of promising them. And so when Tim Burton and Michael Keaton were attached, it was like, whoa, 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 whoa! I thought you guys are,
Right.
I thought you, Michael, are promising us this. Why are you hiring them? So I kind of understand where their outrage is coming
A
from.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the result was great. I think he was I still, to this day, think he's the best Batman that we've had on the big screen. Christian Bale wasn't into it at all. The movies are fantastic, but if you were to strip away that fantastic film around him as Batman, that's just Christian Bale being Christian Bale. He doesn't sell this. I don't know. There's not an elegance to it. There's not a style to it. It all feels forced. He feels like a high school kid. I'll probably get beat up for that, but Christian Bale is not doing it for me as Batman. I think Bruce Wayne or Michael Keaton was able to just be an excellent, effortless Bruce Wayne, to where he's a down to earth guy, but he's also this guy, and he could switch it back and forth on a dime with no effort at all. It's just him being him. And once he's in Batman, it's like there's no fake voice and no stuff cotton underneath your lips to create this different look. It's just go for it. And he delivers the line, I'm Batman and stuff like that. It's great. I mean, he sold it.
I agree. To this day, my favorite Batman is also on-screen Batman is Michael Keaton. And I don't know if I'm sure you saw this. Hollywood Reporter did a poll last week or 2 weeks ago for the all-time favorite on-screen or movie Batmans. And Christian Bale came out on top. I was like, nah, that's Michael Keaton's position, I think. And
yeah, I mean, it's basically Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, and everybody else. You know? Val Kilmer and George Clooney are in their own little world, but it's not really shoulder to shoulder there. I definitely think Michael Keaton was able to just add much more authentic depth to the role.
I grew up a Superman fan, not a Batman fan. But I'm sure most of you viewers out there who are the hardcore Batman fans can make a better argument than mine about this. But the reason Michael Keaton is my favorite Batman is because I think you also graced this a little earlier in your argument that he fits as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. To me, Ben Affleck, he was a decent Bruce Wayne, but he was not he was not a good fit as Batman, at least to me, especially with him, killing bad guys, breaking people's necks.
Yeah.
Christian Bale, to me, was a better Batman than Bruce Wayne, but by the second film, The Dark Knight, his distorted voice became sort of a running gag, or like it becomes a distraction. The other Batmans don't have like, they don't sound like that, especially the Tim Burton's Batman. Michael Keaton just sounds like Michael Keaton when he's Batman. And so I like that.
Yeah, and everything just felt natural. I don't think we really even got to see the true sample of what Ben Affleck could have done in this character. I think he could have definitely been fantastic had he just had some time to develop and get maybe his own solo film. I think he was always kind of interjected into these other movies and not really given time to dive into that. We're getting a lot of tropes of the character, and he did them great. And I think it would have been awesome to see him tie them all together with a little bit more dialogue to kind of learn a little bit more about him. But from what we get, I mean, Michael Keaton was great because it's like he can totally carry off that just lavish, rich sophistication one minute, and then the next minute in this scene, he's eating dinner in the back kitchen with Alfred and Vicky, and basically saying, I couldn't find my socks if it wasn't for Alfred, and it's just that's human. That just feels
Yeah.
very natural like that. But then he's really able to turn it on and just have that intimidation about him when he's goes into the apartment and he smashes the thing against the wall. He's like, let's get nuts. It's like he sells it. He's got that edge to him to where it's like, okay, he seems kind of docile, but it's like, I don't know if I want to mess with that guy. And it works because he carries that over into Batman and elevates it to full superhero mode to me.
Yep. Totally agree with all those points. A quick fun fact for the viewers. It was Michael Keaton who came up with the famous "I'm Batman" line. On the script, it was supposed to be "I am the Knight," something along that line. But he improvised that, and that became iconic. All other Batmans after that, take that as well. "I'm Batman," especially in Christian Bale, and Mel Gibson was the first choice for the role, but he by that point already committed to Lethal Weapon 2, which already came out in 1989 as well. Pierce Brosnan met with Tim Burton and the producers about the role, but Pierce ultimately walked out because he could not take the character Batman seriously. So that's very unfortunate for him.
Yeah.
And I like the yellow Batman emblem, the insignia, right? The other Batman bat suits, they just like make it dark and black, just like blends with the whole suit. I like that whole thing just stands out. The yellow. What do you
Yeah, it
think?
was perfect because it was like like that old version of like Superman where he's like in the spandex.
Yes.
But it was like a perfect kind of like in between like today where it's like body armor and stuff like that to where it was like that perfect just rubber suit. I don't know, he can't turn his head in it, but I mean, it worked. I mean, it was like all practical. He could move in it and, pulling out his cape. It really just worked for the look of the film. It wasn't too flashy. Just that logo sticking out of his chest was all you really needed.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's talk about that because for those two scenes that I mentioned earlier, when he falls back down, after getting shot at by the criminals, it seems like there are for those couple of times, the movie wants to emphasize his body armor. Like like the movie really wants you to know, oh, he's wearing body armor. Why do you think that is?
Um, Probably to kind of escape the fact of like he's not wearing a leotard. It's not a spandex suit. It's like it's not just a rubber suit. There's body armor under there to
Yeah.
kind of sell that like the kind of a slightly toned down version of like what Bruce Wayne is now, to where it's almost like James Bond, to where they're constantly referring to little gadgets and little trinkets that his suit has. It's kind of like just a more subtle version of that, I think.
But I think my theory also is that, and this is not to belittle the movie, and I think I appreciate it because of this. Compared to other Batmans, Christian Bale and Ben Affleck, where those Batmans, when they fight the criminals, they're smooth. They're really like really like Iko Uwais kind of smooth, whereas this Batman, Michael Keaton, is like, oh, there's a couple of times when he falls down, or when he
Yeah.
gets he doesn't get the upper hand. I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
and it kind of strikes me too. Is like it just seems like a line from a comic book. Like if you'd see the guy get shot and it goes down, it's like, well, he's wearing body armor. You can just kind of like that slight comic inspiration to some of the dialogue. And it's like I noticed that there's certain lines and the way people say things and certain things, the way people emphasize certain words that almost just feels like little homages to just like the tone of like phrase that people use in comic books sometimes, like very short phrases, like in the older books, little reactionary things to kind of like explain what you're like little splashes of exposition.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is not Batman's origin story. This is actually Joker's origin story. As a matter of fact, the origin of Batman is only that one brief flashback scene where it's revealed that Joker supposedly kills his parents. And I think one of the criticism, because I read some of the reviews that came out during that time, is that some of the fans and the critics felt like this is more of a Joker movie than a Batman movie, and Joker overshadows Batman, even though the title is Batman. So some of them feel like, oh, why doesn't Batman have more screen time than Jack Nicholson, Joker? What do you think about that criticism?
Oh, well, that's just because at the time Jack Nicholson was
The bigger
Jack
star.
Nicholson. Oh
He was the
yeah.
bigger star. He got
You
two
want him to
Oscars.
be in the, he's not going to come in and play second fiddle. So I mean, even the fact that
That's right.
Michael Keaton is the headliner at the time, there wasn't really too many bigger names in Hollywood than Jack Nicholson. Now, a lot of people nowadays may not know that, but at the time he was a draw, and to get him into this movie, it's probably going to be like, okay, was it the Red Hood story line
Uh,
where that I
yeah,
think it's inspired by the Red Hood
yeah. He
origins
fell.
of
He fell
Joker,
to.
where he kind of throws
Yeah,
accidentally creates him that way.
yeah.
So I think that was where it was like a lot of that was probably to get Jack Nicholson on board to play this, to where it's like, you're not going to be like the villains of today, where you come in, you have your arc, you get one little leg up, and then you're done
Yes.
in the final battle. And it's like that was where it's like we're going to really dive into your character. And it was great because I think the stuff that we get from Batman is really all we kind of needed in that. I mean, you can kind of piece everything together. You don't really need the origin story. See the eccentric growth of just crazy Jack Nicholson as Joker is what kind of makes the movie appealing to me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a 1A with, one being Joker and 1A being Batman, and it worked.
Yes, no, I agree. I think we did not really need Batman training, how he got his fight training and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like and you're right. By this point, Jack already had two Oscars. So I remember, like, I think the advertisements for this is like Nicholson is like the bigger name. Keaton's like smaller font size than Nicholson.
Yeah.
So I totally
Yeah.
understand. And. I read also that Jack Nicholson demanded some things, and of course, those demands got granted because he's a big star. He had $6 million in salary, and he also received percentage of the box office gross, and that totaled up to like $60 million. And he also got royalties from the merchandise sales. Man,
He saw it coming ahead of time.
he had a good agent. He had a good.
Yeah. More than paid for his courtside Laker tickets all these years.
That was probably the
That's
purpose.
That's wise business moves right there. When you come in, you're a two-time Oscar winner coming in, they're asking you to play this Joker character where you got to get real odd and really, it's a character performance. He's not coming in and Michael Keaton really, he delivered a great Batman and a great Bruce Wayne, but it wasn't really like he was character acting. I mean, there was a lot of Michael Keaton in there that just worked for this. I mean, Jack Nicholson, other than having that kind of pre-built sneer that he has and that look with those high eyebrows, I mean, everything else was pretty much like he dove into that. So yeah,
I agree.
And he made a killing off it because he's like, this is going to be big,
He foresaw it, man. He foresaw it. And let's talk about Joker. I love because the first time I watched it when I was a kid, I was freaked out a little bit by the cosmetic, the smile thing that holds his cheek sideways.
Yeah.
But now as I rewatched the movie again and again, I grew to love it. I'm like, this is a creepy look. Whereas Heath Ledger and Jared Leto and all, even Joaquin Phoenix are coming up. They're just using their pretty much face. There's not much pulling their cheeks aside. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I love it because
Yes,
it's like
right?
it's kind of practical, but it looks like kind of like he's drawn like a comic book drawing, And I like the fact that when he's going through his cosmetic poisoning, it's like giving everybody the Joker smile, and it goes off into this whole like side tangent of wanting to be an artist, and this is his living art and stuff like that. I mean, it's great. It's kind of like a subtle way to like dive. You don't need to tell us that he's crazy when he's doing this kind of stuff. It's like you can see it, It's like when he breaks into the museum, defaces all that art, sits down in front of Vicky, and he like brings the girl over and sits her down and takes it off, and she gets up and he's like, well, no Picasso, but it's not horrible. It's like that he's got that charm, that sense of humor that we kind of like, that's made that character so lasting over the years.
And I know that the art design was fantastic in this film, and it deserved that Oscar that they won. But I was surprised that it didn't win Oscar for best makeup because that part, because his basically the Joker's face, the base is white. So sometimes he would like cover it up with human flesh makeup color,
Mm-hmm.
And I like that whenever he does that, he would wipe it and he would show the
Yeah.
white underneath. I was like, oh,
Yeah, it's very cool, subtle,
It's like, why didn't it get recognized at the Oscars for that? That's amazing.
Yeah, it should have won. I think Elfman's score should have won best score because I don't think
yes.
you go back and you watch this movie, just the timing of the music with the events that we see in the film is just so well done. I mean, even for just like that scene where he goes to where his parents were killed, and like he's got his flowers, and it's like this symphony kind of very subtle music plays as he drops the flowers, the notes
Yes.
change. Everything is just perfectly timed, and then it incorporates Prince's music and stuff. But yeah, I mean, Elfman not winning an Oscar for this score is kind of a shame.
All right. Elfman, of course, Tim Burton's go-to guy. Of course, he brings his, usual, a lot of emphasis on the drum, and of course the iconic theme, da, 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 and it got used again for the Batman animated series. It was iconic. People today, especially Gen Z, they're used to what's this, Molossus, right? Hans Zimmer. From
Yeah.
the Batman Begins music, and that's
Hmm.
fine, but that's totally fine. But I think it doesn't hold up or doesn't compare to Danny Elfman's Batman. This thing is just, it's in my head for days on end compared
Yeah,
to
and I mean,
Molossus.
just the way it's timed with the movie, even in the subtle scenes, that you don't really know how artistic it is and without paying attention to it because it's just good. And that's the good thing about his score. It's like when it needs to take over and grab your attention, it takes over and grabs your attention. When it needs to kind of just capture the emotion of a scene without any dialogue or anything, it really is able to do that. So it was very versatile. And yeah, that main beat to it just has been lasting. I think it's still just the best Batman score ever.
I agree. You mentioned Prince and the use of Prince's songs. I read that Tim Burton was against it at the time because he didn't like how the songs were used in the film, and that was one of the criticisms that came out of the movie. That the songs felt out of place. When you want to have something dark and serious, and you have this upbeat 80s synthesizer kind of song, but then
Hmm.
that Dance Revolution that you can actually literally work out to.
Hmm.
But having rewatched the movie again and again, I really like that Party Man song when the defacing the museum scene. It grows on me.
Yeah, and it adds to that kind of just curiosity of the movie because, like I said before, it's like it looks like it's set in the 70s or the 60s, but there's a lot of cars from the 70s, mid 70s. It's very nondescript, and then you have this scene where it's like very modern, like 80s music, late 80s music, like you said. Yeah, it almost kind of seems like I could see Burton may have wondered like, okay, they're trying to get Prince in here to do some of the music, so they're obviously trying to get some more just press behind this thing. But I mean, yeah, I think the dance scene holds up. I mean, Jack
Well,
Nicholson sells it. I mean, it's kind of goofy looking at all the other guys in the background. I think there's some cheesy parts in the scene, but I think it still holds up. But yeah, I mean, it definitely kind of is out of place towards like a much lighter party tone compared to like the subject
yes.
matter of the scene that was taking place, you know?
But I think you can agree with me that the reason why they wanted Prince is because Prince, just like Jack Nicholson, was at the height of his popularity at the time. Having won an Oscar for Purple Rain and whatnot, and of course everybody
Mhm.
loved Prince. So it's like you said, it's like a marketing commercial decision. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
this
if we get
movie sold
Prince.
quite a few soundtracks as well.
Exactly. So that was a
Yes.
great business decision on their part, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah.
Let's go. I forgot to mention about the Joker. Also, one of the criticism that came out when the movie hit theaters is that the fans, some of them, because fans are divided. Fans of movies, fans of comic books. There's Puritans, diehards. They don't want things to be changed or altered from what the original material or
Mm.
what they know all their lives, and those people were kind of ticked off that or at the concept in this movie where the Joker was the killer of Bruce Wayne's parents instead of Joe Chill, which is what who he was the murderer in the comic books. What are your thoughts about that? My thoughts is that it I kind of understand why they go or why they went with that direction because you don't want Batman to keep like searching or for the next sequel like about the arc is about like, oh, who murdered my parents. To have it just be about Jack Napier or Jack Nicholson be the guy that did it. It kind of it has the movie start and end in that one movie, Batman movie. You know what I'm saying? You get where I'm getting at?
Yeah, yeah. It was basically this movie was looks like it's aimed towards adults when you watch the trailer, but it was definitely aimed for kids. And it creates that very generic, formulaic motivation for the hero to want to kill the villain that much more.
Yeah.
it's a ding on the movie for me. I think it could have very, very easily been left out and not really impacted Batman's motivation to get the Joker. It was kind of unnecessary, but I think it was like to get audiences like, okay, we don't want people to like Joker too much because Jack's very charismatic in this role. So it's like Nicholson's going to kill it. We don't want the anti-hero to come out too much, so let's just make it to where he was the one that killed his parents. And then, of course, you're going to want to kill him. That's kind of like what happens when sometimes movies are aimed towards too massive an audience. They simplify the story tropes for conveniences. And, yeah, every time I watch the movie, that little scene, it's like, wow, if you cut that one little scene out, it's great.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me ask you this, Anthony. Have you ever danced with the devil by the pale moonlight?
I think I might have came dangerously close a couple times and not even known it at the time. I have to ask a couple of my exes about that.
That's a good one. I love that. Thank you so much. Now, Lando Calrissian shows up as Harvey Dent, and my God, he is underused. He's barely in the movie. You know, he plays Harvey Dent. He never got to be Two-Face. Of course, in the subsequent movies, he never got rehired again because Tommy Lee Jones plays that character. But man, you have Lando and you don't use him. I feel like that's a bit of an insult.
Yeah, it was a loaded cast. I mean, I thought he was great. I would have liked to see him more, but I don't think his story arc really fitted into like the main beat of this. It was a very simplistic storyline, you know? It's like you create the Joker. Joker starts to poison people. Batman's got to stop it. Oh, and he killed your parents, so that makes you got to save the girl. That wrap it up real easy. I don't think it really. And it was still like almost a 2-hour movie. And I like to see he was great as Harvey Dent. You know, it's like we don't have time to worry about ghosts and goblins as he's puffing on his cigar. Great little splashes. So for that aspect, it's like it's kind of even like Pat Hingle. What was the guy that played Knox?
Robert Wool.
Yeah, all of them were great for their bits. Just great little side pieces. Robert Wool, which is like constant sexual harassment with Vicky Vale from the get-go. It was like, wow, this is definitely an 80s movie. Hey, you want to photograph me, you're going to need a long lens, you know? It's like everybody just pops in at the right time. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see more, but at the same time, having their like these familiar faces as these side characters kind of just makes everything come together.
That's true. By the way, I keep saying Lando. It's the actual actor is Billy D. Williams.
Billy D. Williams.
Yeah. Sorry,
He'll
guys.
always be Lando to us.
Now, but you're right. Knox would not survive in this Me Too workplace era. Definitely.
No. Not at all. And I loved Alfred in this one. Michael Gough or Gough.
Alfred.
I don't know
Go.
Go. Yeah, he was great. I love the relationship with that he had with. I think I really like Michael Caine as well down the road, but I think him in this role, he was great. I just love the chemistry that him and Keaton had together. It really captured that fatherness without trying to beat you over the head with it. And it was great. It was just very subtle lines.
Well, that's another bone I'm picking with this movie. And you can enlighten me here. I don't understand, of course, him walking up the clock tower on the steps. We've talked about that, but I also don't understand like why Alfred is so adamant about you gotta tell Vicky that you're Batman, and then he's so adamant about like revealing Bruce Wayne / Batman to Vicky Vale. Why are you being the matchmaker? I don't freaking Alfred.
I think that would be another instance of the very generic storylines because they wanted to sell the love angle as well. If you kind of go back and look at it, it's like everything is very intentional in the movie to where it's like blatant. It's like Alfred is single-handedly keeping the love interest alive in the movie that's completely forgetting about it at times because it goes back to the main plot and then it comes back to Alfred and it's like, no, you guys are supposed to love each other, There's a love triangle here. Keep it going. He's basically there to show that Bruce would not be able to live without him and to show that he would never be able to find love. And it also kind of forces him trying to like kind of usher him off into the next stage of his life subtly. But really, he's there as a plot device many times just to keep the love dynamic in the movie going.
Exactly, because I think by that point, before Vicky Vale enters the Batcave, I already forgot about the whole love thing. I'm like, let's get the plot going after Joker thing and going. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? By that point, I'm like, I'm just so invested in that. I'm like, I don't care if she doesn't end up with him.
Yeah, Alfred sets up all the momentum for the kiss at the end.
um, I
Quite a wingman. Quite a wingman. Yeah,
you want to have Alfred in your on your side if you're single, definitely.
yeah. Even Michael Keaton in the movie is like, well, why don't you marry her? You know?
That's right.
Even he's like, why don't you marry her, man? And he's like, it's not really what I had in mind.
Speaking of whom, of course, I grew up in the '90s, watched movies like The Getaway and others. Kim Basinger is one of the world's bombshells at the time, one of the hotties of hotties. And but Vicky Vale, the character Vicky Vale, to me, even after having rewatched this movie again and again, Vicky Vale just doesn't do much for me. She's not even a good photographer or photojournalist if you compare her to somebody like James Olsen. The movie wants to make her seem like she's this amazing, world-renowned photojournalist. But aside from that one portfolio that she carries around, but whenever aside from that, whenever she's in action with her camera, it was very brief to the point where I'm just not convinced.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced of this great photojournalist reputation that she supposedly has. She's there just as a love interest.
Yeah, that's the problem with this movie is like it's 30 years ago and obviously there was no I don't she wasn't written as a strong independent female as much as she was like we were told she was supposed to be one.
Yes,
But
see?
it's like her mannerisms, her demeanor. It's like we're supposed to buy her as this strong, intelligent, and very skilled photographer that's had years of experience. The Corto Maltese project, but then all of a sudden, like boom, she's a damsel in distress.
And she
So
screamed a lot of times.
She's kind of like window dressing in the movie a lot. I think that's where it's like this movie does definitely feel dated because I think she could have been much better written. I think even by the time 1992 came around with Batman Returns, I think Michelle Pfeiffer's character was much better written, even
Yes.
though it had its setbacks. I think it could have been advanced, but there was advancement in the character. But yeah, I mean, she was window dressing here. She was
Exactly,
here to
right?
wear the fashionista clothes and to look the part. We were told she was supposed to be the part. None of the dialogue or her scenes capture her as anything other than
For
a
reals.
love interest to where it needs to be saved.
For reals, man. So I
Yeah.
think to me, Vicky Vale is the weakest link of all the
Yeah.
elements in this film. Not to
And Kim Basinger at the time was a very skilled. She's a talented actress, and I think she could have done so much more in this role had the writing allowed her. But yeah, I think her dialogue was extremely thin.
And Kim Basinger won Oscar for L.A. Confidential. So it's not like she's not a good actress. She's a very
No,
capable
no, she
actress.
is.
It's just the material was just not right for her. Vicky
I mean,
Vale.
even just the tone of the dialogue in the workplace with like Robert Wool as Knox's constant, just advances towards her, just never
Yeah.
painted her as a strong female. It's like you get one of those with like a woman that is not going to take that nowadays. It's like you get one of those lines before you get the shit knocked out of you or you get taken to HR. He's just repeated and she's just like, hi, yeah, you're silly. And then one time it's like he's trying to like, why are you so infatuated with Michael Keaton or Bruce Wayne? And he's like, oh, is this really what that's about? It's like they're just using that. They're using him constantly advancing her to create that divide for them later. It's so, you can see it coming a mile away. It's very elementary level story breaking down.
I agree. Quick fun fact for our viewers: Sean Young from Blade Runner was supposed to play Vicky Vale, but she had a horse riding accident, and so I read that Michelle Pfeiffer was offered the role, but Michael Keaton did not want Michelle Pfeiffer at the time because he had dated Michelle before, and so that would be awkward. He said. So funny enough, Michelle ends up playing Catwoman years later. But anyway, Sean Young couldn't do the role. And so producer John Peters called Kim Basinger, was like, hey, how fast can you get here? And so that's basically the story of how she got on board. The behind-the-scenes TMZ drama story that during the production is that Michael Keaton wanted to be romantic with Kim Basinger, but John Peters snatched her first. So that's a little bit of a TMZ drama there for you as well.
Yikes.
That I found out when I was doing research for this. So as we're winding down to our final bullet points. Oh, by the way, is there anything that you want to add before we get to the final?
No, keep going. Yeah, we'll see what.
Okay.
Something might pop into my head, I'm sure.
Um, so I love that, brother. I love that. I rewatched the movie again last night, and besides the criticism that we pointed out earlier, I overall, when you ask the question like what made Tim Burton's 1989 Batman a classic, and why do you think this movie still holds up today, even against Christopher Nolan's or any of the other Zack Snyder's Batman? I think one reason in my theory, and you can share yours if you agree or disagree, that after the whole years with Adam West campy, this Tim Burton dared to let's go a different direction. Let's go something that the fans wanted to see. So that's one reason. And Tim Burton, I get his quote here. He said that the whole film and mythology of the character is a complete duel of the freaks. It's a fight between two disturbed people. So that's how he approached it. And I find that to be the one that's unique about this, in addition to what we discussed earlier, how it's dark but has comedic elements to it.
Yeah, he pulled it off. It's got its. I think this movie just thrives on the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's like it was able to usher into the new modern era at the time, but there's lots of tones to like the 60s Adam West Batman in this movie, just in little splashes here and there. That's why it's like he was able to, when you reboot something or you readapt something, you want to take an homage from the source material and you want to expand it with your own little flair, but not add. I think Tim Burton nowadays oftentimes add too much Tim Burton to his movies. To where
good point.
Now this was like he was only 2 movies in, so he was able to be reined in just enough to where he's able to add his creative flair, his artistic vision for this world and have a concept behind it, but he was restrained enough to not go full board into where he is now. But that could have just been him as these years pass. He gets much more comfortable and confident in himself as a filmmaker. But at the time, other than doing a bunch of shorts and 2, Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, I mean, he was pulled in just enough. They were able to we like what you have, but you can only do this much. And I think that was a perfect balance of the studio saying no, but still allowing some creative control, because it creates its own world. That those first 2 Batman movies from Tim Burton, I think, are great. I think the second one, a little too much Tim Burton. This one, they gave him a little bit more control to where it's a little bit too much in some scenes. But in this one here, it was a perfect balance of that. I think anytime you want to go back and you want to see this version of Batman, you can go back and see this version of Batman, and there's a little bit of the 60s to compare it to, but it really doesn't compare itself to anything else. I mean, because it's so out there, but it still feels like the source material, looks like it, sounds like it, takes you to the world of it, but it's very much its own. Despite all the movies. So it's like, even the campiness still kind of holds up because it didn't go too much. Like the Joel Schumachers, sure, I mean, they're not the best. There's some fun moments in them. I would be lying if I said I didn't often pop them on just to go vacuum the house and just to listen to the craziness. I mean, A lot of it's way too much. I mean, Jim Carrey was great as the Riddler. He's awesome. He's just over the top. So, but it's too much at times. So this one is the one where it's like it does that. Those don't hold up over times as full movies to watch. But I think this one, from start to finish, great score, great production design, A-list talent that really committed to the roles, and it all works.
I forgot to mention, so we'll have to slip this in before we end. We got to talk about this. This is like the most, one of the most iconic things about Batman, the Batmobile. Of all the Batmobiles on-screen Batman movies, this is probably my favorite. I talk about Michael Keaton being my favorite Batman. This is my favorite Batmobile. Even though the Batmobile in this one doesn't get a lot of screen time, but when it does show up, it's memorable. Especially when the machine guns start starts shooting out of it. Shields up, shields open.
Shields up.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
And I know the other vehicle that shows up is Batwing, And if you notice that that one scene nearing the end, I think before he takes the balloons away from the Joker, or maybe afterwards, Batwing comes out to the stratosphere, and then like you can see against the moon.
Sends the back signal to himself, man. He's calling himself into action right there. That's one of those ones where it's like, boom, let's have a little bit of splash of that campy comic book action and then right back into the grounded real stuff again, you know?
Yeah, so like, what's the point of like,
Yeah.
making a bad signal on his own? But that was just like, just for fun, for that split
and it was
second.
just great. I mean, he's got all those balloons at the festival. He grabs them all up, takes them up into space. Yeah, it just creates this fun adventure story. It's truly another time and place, but it feels like our place. It doesn't take you back to the 60s or to the 70s or the 80s. It takes you back to its own little disambiguous kind of setting. And that's kind of why it holds up, because it didn't rely on practical effects that could get dated later, or special like CGI and stuff like that. I mean, some of the CGI, there's a couple little moments here and there. They're not the best, but that's why all of it's real practical. A lot of it's just real physical sets, and that's why it's like, even though time passes, you can kind of still go back and respect it, as far as like even a movie that came out 5 years after that, that's CGI heavy. 15 years later, it's not an easy watch, because it looks like something that you could make on, Adobe After Effects.
And I gotta add too, like, as I said earlier, this is the Batmobile that makes me want to say, I want to have that Batmobile. When you see Val Kilmer's or George Clooney's, even like the 60s Adam West Batman, I know people always have replicas of that at Comic-Con or whatnot, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I want the Michael Keaton's Batmobile. That's the one that I want to ride. It's just like, if you see the design, it's all just black. It's just like, there's no
everything fits
color.
The design of the suit. He definitely coordinates across from the Batwing to the Batmobile to his gear to inside the Batcave. Everything has that same theme of just sleek and like a shell.
Yes.
Not too many bells and whistles, not too many lights. It still just looks like a beefed up car that someone could kind of build if you put the right pieces together. You still got your fire coming out of the back, and inside it's got its cockpit and all that stuff. It's great because it's not overdone.
Now, let me share some fun fact for our viewers here. For those of you car nerds out there, the Batmobile was built on the chassis or model of Chevy Impala, and they incorporated the engine of an Impala, the taillights of a Ferrari, and the fuel cups of a London bus, and jet engine parts from a Harrier jump jet. I don't know what that is, but sounds so awesome.
That sounds like the fire out of the back.
Exactly. The sliding cockpit is inspired by that of a Harrier, with the slim windows of a gun emplacement. The art director adds the headlights of a Honda Civic to the vehicle after noticing them from his wife's car. It says here the Batmobile was 20 feet 6 meters long, 20 feet long, 6 meters long. Had an 8-foot wheelbase, weighed 1.5 tons. 2 prototypes were built for the production. The flames that shoot from the rear were created using paraffin. And as a special promotion around the film, MTV held the Steal the Batmobile contest, where the winner would be awarded one of the prototypes that had the engine removed, of course. The designers, taking into account Michael Keaton's bat cowl, because when Michael Keaton's in the vehicle with his bat cowl, sometimes it would stuck to the top of the Batmobile, so they had to kind of like readjust that for his cockpit to make it lower as low as possible for him. And so and sometimes they would even have to design a separate or alternate bat cowl with it like shorter, so then it could fit into the Batmobile.
They were pretty tall. You just imagine having a scene in the shot when the thing slides back and his like bat ears are like curved back, or they split this direction. It's not very intimidating. It's like you pinch your ear, he gets out of his car and his ears are all bent.
Dude, I saw Watchmen again the other day. I was like, because the Night Owl kind of looks like Batman. I was like, oh, this is shorter kind of ears.
Yeah, that was the best look they did, was shortening up the ears for sure. Yeah, I can imagine that being like a design problem in the last minute. It's like, production design is set, Batmobile is built, the bat suit is built. We get him in the car, we sit him down, and he slide the thing back, and it's like bends his ears back. Oh, what a mess! How many millions of dollars would that be to fix?
And you know what I love though? Now we're celebrating the 30th anniversary. Well, one of the many things that I love is that Michael Keaton is still proud of that role. Like he's not. It's not like Bruce Willis. Whenever somebody yells at him on the streets, like "Yeah, yippee ki yay," he would get pissed. I don't know if he get
Yes.
he get annoyed. He gets annoyed by that. Whereas Michael Keaton's like, "Yeah, Batman. I'm Batman." He loves that. He still. And Jack Nicholson, I read, he also loves the character, the Joker. At one point, after the movie came out or on VHS or whatever, I read that he would often play that tape in his house frequently because he loves that performance. So it's cool knowing that after all these years, the guys involved with the film, including Tim Burton as well, that maybe the movie's not all that perfect. We've discussed all the criticisms here in the video, but they're like, you know what? That's still cool that we made that,
Yeah.
And if you call me Batman, shout across the street, "Hey, I'm Batman!" I'm Michael Keaton. Is like, yeah, Batman. He's still cool and he's not annoyed by it.
Yeah, because even where the film doesn't hold up, there's still good, fun homages to the characters. So it's like there's a lot of quality here. I mean, I think that at the time the movie looked much ahead of its time. I mean, some of the stuff we saw in this was like, wow, I'm never going to see anything that looks better than that. And, like this, it still holds up. The story elements are fun. And it's like you can feel proud of it because it's like it doesn't have like a bad reputation all these years later. It's still kind of like people like love it for what it is. So it's like hopefully, obviously, if they took these roles on, maybe they had liked the characters, knew the characters, maybe had a certain love for the characters, felt that they were represented well as them. So it's like good to keep that memory going.
All right. Before we end, I know this is not the video discussing just the character Batman, but mostly about Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie. But now we know that Robert Pattinson will become the next Batman. And if I were Robert Pattinson, I'd probably go to Michael Keaton's house, have a conversation with them, ask for advice or two, trying to get wisdom from the master before me. I would do that if I were him. So just I want to pick your thoughts. What do you think? Because I told my friends like, oh, another Batman movie, like really? But Robert Pattinson seems like he's the kind of guy that might pull it off, might prove me wrong. Because I've seen his talents in other indie films that are not Twilight movies, and he seems to have what it takes acting wise to pull this off. I want to ask you just what are your thoughts about this next new Batman? Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always excited for a new version of the Batman story. I mean, this one looks like it's maybe starting a little bit younger to kind of grow into the character. So I would like to get to know a Batman that we could keep for a while, like over a course of the film. That could like several films that could maybe, I don't know, maybe the Joker movie will tie into it or something. Let's kind of start building this little stories. Let's get a good movie about our villain, then get a movie about Batman and put it together. But like you said, it's like I've never seen any of the Twilights before, so I've only seen Robert Pattinson in movies like The Rover, Good Time, Necropolis. What are the Acropolis? What are these? I've only really seen him in indie movies.
Cosmopolis.
Never seen him as a vampire. So for that aspect, it's like I'm ready to go. I mean, of course, he's probably going to put on like maybe 25 pounds of muscle.
Yes.
But yeah, as long as he dives into the character and tries to get his own version of it that still feels like Bruce Wayne, I don't think it's hard to sell the Batman side of it. I mean, I think you could do Batman because you're basically all you got is this. So as long as they're not messing up your voice and as long as, it just looks more practical and more real and not like all these CGI outfits that we have of today, let's keep it grounded. Let's move it forward and let's see what he can do. I mean, everything I've seen the guy in, it's like even like a couple of the movies haven't been the best, but he's always been fantastic. I've been able to really buy into any character that he's been selling to me. So until he proves me wrong, I want to see him do it.
That's good point. That I agree in that we would love to have just one Batman for a long time because it's instead of like having it be like James Bond where they keep replacing it every 2-3 films. The only person that has been doing it for a long time, just one character, is Hugh Jackman. Wolverine, Logan, it's like we don't get like 2-3 Logans every 2-3 years or 2-3
Yeah.
films. So
Yeah.
you're right. It would be lovely if Robert Pattinson can keep doing Batman for
Get some continuity and keep
yeah.
going. I mean, I'm very glad that he got it over Nicholas Hoult. I mean, I love Nicholas Hoult as an actor, but I do not see him. I do
That's
not
true.
see what he's had in his roles before that could tell me that he could pull into this Batman. There's other heroes that I think he could play, but I don't. Batman isn't one of them. Robert Pattinson, I've seen him go dark, so I know he could go at least 80% back to that and give me some Batman that I will like.
Indeed, indeed. Okay,
I'd be
so
willing to predict that he's going to do a good job. I have a feeling.
I hope so. I hope so. But
Yeah.
there is only one Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, and so
Right.
happy 30th anniversary, happy 30th birthday to the film. And so for the viewers, Anthony, where can they find and subscribe to you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at the Silver Screen Analysis. You can find me at silverscreenanalysis.com. I'm on Twitter at Your Cinema Guy or Silver Screen Analysis. You can find me, just type in Silver Screen Analysis anywhere you want and I'll show up.
All right. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for yet another awesome collabo that we have today.
Yeah,
And,
always a good time.
yes, and hopefully we'll get to do more of this in the near future. Thank you so much, brother. Let's
Thanks,
rock
buddy.
this.